What if that meticulous, 5-year plan you just obsessed over is basically, well, fundamentally useless?
Oh, man. That is a terrifying thought for a lot of people.
Right. But today, we are told constantly that success is just this pure meritocracy. I mean, the prevailing narrative is that if you optimize your routine, put in the grueling hours, and follow the right strategic roadmap, you are the absolute master of your own destiny.
Yeah, it's comforting. It
Yeah.
really makes us feel like we are entirely behind the steering wheel of our own lives.
Exactly. But it might just be the ultimate modern illusion.
It really is. We treat life like a GPS navigation system. You plug in the destination, you avoid the red traffic lines, and you inevitably arrive at success. But when you step out of the self-help aisle and into the brutal reality of actual history, that clean, linear formula completely falls apart.
Which is exactly why you, the listener, provided us with the perfect sources to shatter that illusion. Welcome to this deep dive.
Glad to be here for this one.
Today, we are taking your modern belief in total personal control and, well, throwing it against a 500-year-old manual on ruthless power. We are unpacking excerpts from Niccolo Machiavelli's masterwork, The Prince.
Specifically, we're looking at his views on fortune and new principalities, alongside his biographical sketch, The Life of Castruccio Castracani.
Right. And our mission today is to explore a really profound tension in those texts. Exactly how much of political and personal success does Machiavelli attribute to pure, unadulterated skill versus the unpredictable, chaotic whims of luck?
Yes, we're going to find out if human planning is actually foolproof, or if, we're all just building sandcastles at the edge of a rising tide.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to really grasp how Machiavelli views our modern concept of a meritocracy, we have to start with his baseline. Like, how much control does he actually think human beings possess over their own lives?
That's the perfect starting point, because in the 16th century, the dominant idea was that God and fortune governed the world completely. People thought human wisdom couldn't change a single outcome.
Total fatalism.
Exactly. Machiavelli acknowledges how tempting it is to just throw your hands up and say, well, it's all out of my control, so why even try? But he fundamentally rejects that.
He doesn't think we're just passive passengers.
No, not at all. He calculates it almost like a mathematical equation, which is fascinating. He writes that fortune is the arbiter of about one half of our actions,
Okay.
leaving the other half, or maybe a little less, for us to direct.
A 50-50 split between luck and skill. That is surprisingly measured. But he doesn't just leave it as a dry statistic, right?
No, he brings it to life with this incredibly visceral analogy. He compares fortune to a raging river in flood.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. When it overflows, it sweeps away massive trees, ruins entire buildings, violently tears away the soil, and forces everyone to flee in absolute terror.
Just total devastation.
Right, in that exact moment of destruction, nobody can withstand it. The sheer force of nature overwhelms everything in its path.
So wait, how is that 50% in our control if the river just destroys everything?
Well, that's where Machiavelli introduces a crucial mechanism. He notes that when the weather is fair, when the sun is shining and the waters are calm, men can build barriers.
Like dams and canals.
Exactly. The purpose is so that when the next inevitable flood arrives, the waters are directed and their force is constrained.
Oh, I see. So he isn't saying that human planning is useless against bad luck. He's saying the entire purpose of your skill, your valor, and your ability is to build the levees before the disaster strikes.
Precisely. Fortune only shows her absolute destructive power in the exact places where no defenses have been prepared to constrain her. That is the core mechanism of human agency for him.
It makes a lot of sense.
He looked around at the Italian princes of his era who had lost their states and realized their fatal flaw. In quiet times, they never once considered that the weather could change.
They got complacent.
Right. They didn't build levees. They assumed the calm river was a permanent state of affairs. Machiavelli is warning us that human skill operates within a very specific temporal window. You cannot build a dam while you are actively drowning in a flood.
Yeah, I hear that, but I have to push back here with a modern perspective. If fortune is a literal raging river, isn't modern planning still just a comforting illusion?
How do you mean?
Well, you can spend a decade building a levee, right? You can reinforce it with steel and concrete. But a big enough flood, like a true 1-in-1,000-year freak of nature, will still breach it. Doesn't that make the 50% we supposedly control feel entirely fragile?
It absolutely makes it fragile. And honestly, Machiavelli isn't hiding from that reality. The river metaphor is not a promise of invincibility.
It's just a mitigation strategy.
Exactly. It's a strategy for survival. Your skill doesn't stop the rain from falling, and it might not stop the absolute worst-case scenario. But your preparation dictates whether a standard, predictable storm destroys your entire civilization or just lightly floods your basement.
Right. And the tragedy is that most people don't even build the basic barriers. But that raises a really interesting counter scenario, though.
What's that?
If human skill is the act of building dams against a flood, what happens if the flood never comes? Or, taking it a step further, what if you never have access to a river at all?
That is a brilliant point. And this brings us to a vital prerequisite in Machiavelli's formula for success, the concept of opportunity.
The raw material.
Yes, when he analyzes the greatest self-made founders in history, titans like Moses, Cyrus, Romulus, and Theseus, he makes a really profound observation.
Which is?
He points out that these monumental figures owed absolutely nothing to fortune except opportunity.
So they needed a specific situation to happen?
Exactly. He breaks down their historical ascensions to prove that their skill needed a chaotic canvas. Moses needed the Israelites to be enslaved and oppressed in Egypt.
Because if they were comfortable and happy, they never would have followed him into the desert.
Right. And Romulus had to be abandoned at birth to eventually become the rugged founder of Rome. Cyrus needed to find the Persians deeply discontented with their current rulers.
And Theseus needed the Athenians to be scattered. So without those specific, incredibly chaotic conditions, the immense powers of mind these men possessed would have been completely extinguished.
They would have lived and died in obscurity. But conversely, without their exceptional powers of mind, the historical opportunity would have come and gone in vain.
It's like having the brilliant business acumen of a tech billionaire, but being stranded alone on a desert island.
That's a great way to put it.
You have the merit, you have the relentless work ethic, you have the vision, but you have zero raw material to work with. You're just a highly skilled person yelling at seagulls.
What's fascinating here is that visual captures the dynamic perfectly.
Yeah.
Merit alone cannot manifest success in a vacuum.
Right. We often think of a meritocracy as this frictionless system where the best and brightest naturally rise to the top, just by virtue of existing and working hard.
But Machiavelli argues something much darker. The best only rise if fortune happens to hand them a completely chaotic, broken situation that requires their specific brand of genius to fix.
The chaos is the prerequisite.
Yes, the chaos is what makes the skill visible to the world. Fortune provides the clay, and human ability merely molds it.
So we've seen what happens when high skill meets a lucky opportunity. You get a Moses or a Cyrus. But what happens in the exact reverse scenario?
The reverse scenario.
Yeah, what if a leader is handed ultimate power purely by a massive stroke of luck, without having to build their own foundations or levees first?
This brings us to one of the most fascinating figures of the Renaissance, and Machiavelli's ultimate case study in inherited luck. Cesare Borgia.
Oh, Cesare Borgia. He acquired his massive state entirely through the staggering good fortune of his father becoming Pope Alexander VI. Talk about a golden ticket.
He really did. He didn't have to build the dam himself. He just moved into a massive, fully fortified fortress that someone else constructed.
But he wasn't just some lazy, spoiled heir, right?
Yeah. No, and that's why Borgia is such a compelling obsession for Machiavelli. After receiving that ultimate lucky break, Borgia actually executed a masterclass in trying to build a retroactive meritocratic foundation.
Because he recognized immediately that his power was inherently unstable. He hadn't earned it.
Exactly. His actions were ruthlessly logical. He realized his inherited military troops belonged to rival mercenary families who might turn on him at any moment.
So he wiped them out.
Yeah. He didn't just fire them, he systematically wiped them out using incredibly cunning deception. He invited their leaders to a meeting and had them eliminated.
Brutal. But the truly wild part is how he handled the region of Romagna, right? It was completely overrun by crime and chaos.
This is where we see the sheer psychological depth of his strategy. To pacify the region, Borgia installed a notoriously cruel and efficient governor named Ramiro d'Orco.
He essentially gave Ramiro a blank check.
Yes, a blank check to use brutal violence to clean up the crime.
And it worked. The crime stopped. But Borgia knew that the citizens now deeply hated this cruel governor.
So what does Borgia do? To cleanse his own image and present himself as a savior, he has Ramiro executed.
And he leaves the man's body cut in half in the public square with a bloody knife right beside him. Just, wow.
It's shocking. But we have to look at the underlying mechanism of what Borgia was accomplishing there. He wasn't just committing violence for the sake of it. It was pure political theater.
He needed someone else to do the dirty work.
Right. So the citizens would direct their hatred at Ramiro, not at Borgia. By executing his own enforcer, Borgia manufactured a profound psychological cocktail in the populace.
Absolute terror at his capability for violence, combined with deep gratitude for saving them from a tyrant.
Exactly. He was actively replacing his initial luck with solid, undeniable, and terrifying skill.
He was laying the roots of his power after the tree had already grown. He even anticipated that the next pope might be hostile to his family, so he plotted out massive preemptive measures to secure his position.
He really did think of everything.
So, what does this all mean? If Borgia did everything a perfectly skilled leader is supposed to do, if he secured the loyalty of the people, eliminated his rivals, and planned for the future, doesn't his ultimate ruin prove that merit and planning actually aren't enough to beat bad luck?
It highlights the terrifying, overwhelming power of that 50% controlled by fortune. Borgia lost his empire entirely because of what Machiavelli explicitly calls the extraordinary and extreme malignity of fortune.
Bad luck on a cosmic scale.
Yeah. His father, the Pope, died. That was an eventuality Borgia had meticulously planned for. But at that exact same moment, Borgia himself contracted a sudden, deathly illness.
He literally told Machiavelli that he had thought of every possible scenario that might occur at his father's death, except for the one freak possibility that he himself would be on the brink of death at the exact same time.
He was entirely incapacitated, caught between hostile armies right when he needed his physical and mental health the most to execute his grand strategy.
It's tragic, in a very dark way.
The broader implication here is about the fragility of borrowed luck. Relying heavily on fortune at the beginning of your journey leaves you uniquely vulnerable.
Because Borgia's entire foundation was built on borrowed time.
Exactly. He scrambled with immense, undeniable talent to swap out fortune for skill. But a truly freakish double blow of bad timing proved that sometimes the river just overwhelms the dam.
It shows that a foundation laid after the building is already erected is inherently structurally compromised.
Yes, beautifully put.
So if fortune is so incredibly volatile that it can wipe out even a brilliant, ruthless planner like Borgia with a random fever, how does any leader maintain their 50% of control over the long term?
Well, Machiavelli suggests it requires a level of psychological flexibility that most human beings simply do not possess.
Psychological flexibility.
Yes. He dives into the mechanics of this limitation by introducing the concept of the spirit of the times. Machiavelli argues that to maintain long-term success, a leader must constantly direct their actions to align with the shifting nature of their historical era.
So if the times change, the leader's methods must change with them.
Right. He uses Pope Julius II as his prime example. This was a man who was naturally aggressive, violent, and incredibly impetuous.
He launched a sudden, wild military campaign against Bologna, right?
Without any real strategic caution. And against all odds, it worked perfectly. But it only worked because the specific geopolitical era he lived in required an impetuous, unpredictable leader to catch his enemies off guard.
But wait, if times changed?
Exactly. Machiavelli makes a vital, chilling observation about Julius. If the times had changed and the era suddenly required caution, patience, and delicate diplomacy, Julius would have been utterly ruined.
Because he couldn't adapt.
Right, and the reason why strikes at the core of human nature. Machiavelli argues that men cannot deviate from what nature inclines them to do. If you have prospered your entire life by acting aggressively, no one can persuade you to suddenly become cautious.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Think of it like a professional surfer trying to use the exact same aggressive maneuver on every single wave they encounter.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Right. A heavy, crashing barrel requires a completely different physical technique than a slow, rolling swell. If you stubbornly do your one signature trick every single time, the ocean will eventually crush you.
It absolutely will.
So is Machiavelli suggesting that true, lifelong meritocracy is impossible because human beings are psychologically incapable of changing their fundamental personalities to match the shifting winds of luck?
That is precisely the psychological trap he is exposing. He argues that we are fundamentally rigid creatures. The naturally cautious person doesn't know how to be adventurous when the moment demands a leap of faith.
And then the naturally adventurous person cannot force themselves to be cautious when the ice gets thin. This absolutely shatters how we view successful people today.
It really does.
Think about the modern tech billionaire who succeeded by embracing the motto, move fast and break things. We look at them and declare them a universal genius.
Right, but Machiavelli suggests they aren't necessarily a genius at all. They might just be an incredibly stubborn person whose specific, unchangeable personality flaw, recklessness, happened to perfectly align with what their specific industry needed at that exact historical second.
And the terrifying part for that CEO is that when the wheel of fortune turns and the industry matures and suddenly needs a delicate, cautious architect to maintain stability.
That same reckless CEO is going to act like a wrecking ball and destroy their own company.
Wow.
Their initial success wasn't pure merit. It was the accidental synchronization of their fixed nature with a temporary historical condition. When the condition shifts and they can't adapt, they fall.
That is a lot to process. But to bring all these incredible threads together, the 50-50 split, the prerequisite of opportunity, the danger of borrowed luck, and this psychological trap of adaptability we have to look at the biographical story you brought us.
Yes, the life of Castruccio Castracani.
Right. Machiavelli explicitly details a man's lifelong battle with fortune in this text.
It is a masterful, tragic synthesis of everything we've discussed today. Castruccio started from the absolute bottom of the social hierarchy. He was discovered as an abandoned baby in a vineyard.
Which is such a wild start.
Yeah, and Machiavelli notes right at the beginning of the text that fortune actively loves to start great men in total obscurity. She does this to prove a point, that she, not human wisdom, is the true author of their rise.
Fortune basically wants to show off. She wants all the credit, but Castruccio refuses to just be a pawn, right?
Far from it. He rises through sheer brilliance, intense physical valor, and unmatched military strategy. He transitions from a lowly student to studying arms, climbing the ranks to eventually become the Lord of Lucca.
And he builds literal fortresses out of the towers of his defeated enemies.
He really does. And his merit peaks when he decisively defeats the massive, superior Florentine army at Fucecchio. He used brilliant tactical positioning, trapping them against a river.
So he is the ultimate, undeniable, self-made man of merit.
He built the levees perfectly. He recognized the chaotic opportunity, he applied his skill, and he secured his state. He did everything within human power to control his 50%.
But then, the ultimate irony strikes. Immediately after his greatest, most hard-fought victory, he is standing at the city gates. He's covered in sweat from the battle,
waiting to personally thank his returning troops, because he believes a true leader should be the first in the saddle and the last out.
And while he is standing there, exposed to a midday wind blowing off the Arno River, he catches a chill, just a simple chill.
Yeah.
And a few days later, the greatest military mind of his era dies at age 44.
It's devastating. In his dying speech to his heir, Castruccio offers a heartbreaking confession. He admits that fortune simply cut him off mid-career.
Just abruptly ended his run.
Right. He confesses that despite all his brilliance, he lacked the time to properly secure his realm.
Yeah.
He leaves his heir completely surrounded by powerful enemies.
Because he reasonably assumed he had decades left to consolidate his power.
Exactly. He built a vast estate, but left it unsettled.
You conquer Tuscany, you outsmart the greatest armies of the age, you execute flawless military tactics, and then you get taken out by a stiff breeze. It almost feels like a cosmic joke. Does a story like this fundamentally mock our modern obsession with personal control?
I think it acts as a profound, humbling corrective to our modern arrogance. Modern culture constantly feeds us the narrative that we are 100% the architects of our own lives.
We have a GPS, we control the destination.
Exactly. But Machiavelli is warning us that while we must labor with extreme diligence over the 50% we can control, we must build the levees, train our skills, and ruthlessly seize chaotic opportunities we have to maintain a deep, abiding respect for the sheer randomness of the universe.
Because the universe can and will undo a lifetime of perfect planning with a single gust of wind.
It represents the ultimate terrifying limit of human agency.
So let's wrap up this deep dive for you, the listener. We started by comparing our modern lives to a navigation app, assuming we have total control over our destination if we just follow the turn-by-turn directions.
But Machiavelli's formula for success reveals that the map is only half the journey.
Right. True success requires the raw, chaotic material of opportunity. It requires the relentless skill to build levees against disaster during the calm times.
And above all, it requires the humility to know that a sudden illness, a shifting historical tide, or just a cold wind by a river can still ruin you entirely.
It demands a recognition that merit without luck is just stored potential energy.
And luck without merit is a fragile house of cards waiting to collapse.
Exactly. Thank you, the listener, for bringing these incredibly complex historical texts to the table. You gave us the perfect tools for such a nuanced exploration of luck versus skill.
It was a really fascinating discussion.
But before you go, I want to leave you with one final provocative concept to mull over on your own. At the very end of his chapter on fortune, Machiavelli concludes with a famous and very controversial metaphor. He states that fortune is a woman who favors the bold, the young, and the fiercely adventurous. If fortune truly favors the irrational and the reckless over the cautious, meticulous planner, well, then perhaps the most successful people in history aren't the best meritocratic planners at all.
That's a wild thought.
Perhaps they're simply the most audacious gamblers who manage to cash out the chips just seconds before their luck finally turned. Think about that the next time you sit down to map out your perfectly controlled 5-year trajectory.